Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
Hey, Sure Bet Coffee. Put that giddy up in your cup. That giddy up in your cup. Sure Bet Coffee. Giddy up, giddy up, giddy up, giddy up.
Hello.
Hey, John.
Ciao. How are you? I'm good. I would say, last week we had, 3-point races, derby preps, whatever you want to call them. This week we've only got one, which we'll delve into. But I would say that, in my opinion, after the Sam Davis, which is Saturday at Tampa Bay, is when things really get serious, and this ain't no party, this ain't no disco, this ain't no fooling around kind of thing. It gets game time.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we learned a little bit last weekend with the handful of preps that were run across the country, and the schedule's a little light this weekend with just the Sam Davis down at Tampa, but like you said, I think that's going to be a bit of a springboard into the back half of February here. And then, as we all know, those March and April preps are really when the cream of the crop starts to at least separate itself from the field in terms of kind of peaking at the right time for the Kentucky Derby.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the preps last week, I mean, Nisos kind of just ran away with the preps and ran away with the show and ran away with the hype.
Yeah. It seemed like everybody had their Preakness horse after last weekend.
Yeah, he stamped his ticket to Baltimore in February, I guess. I don't know. A lot can happen between now and then. It's a shame that we won't see him in the Derby, especially if he comes back and wins the Santa Anita Derby in, similar or like fashion. It's just unfortunate that we won't see a horse that exciting and that potentially brilliant in the Derby. And I'll go on record as saying this: I'm not sure that he's the best horse 3-year-old in that barn. What do you think of that?
I don't know who else do you think it would be?
I think that Maimum, if I'm saying it correctly, I'm terrible with names, might turn out to be just as good. He's always got another one. Pinch hitters in that barn are, cleanup hitters in other barns. You know what I mean? They could just step up, and when you have the kind of shed row that he's got out there, who knows who could step forward. I'm still very high on Coach Prime, who scratched out of that race. I liked him that day. So we'll see. I mean, that's might be a crazy statement to say any of them might be better than Nisos, but it's early in the year. These horses are still developing, and I think we saw at Gulfstream in the Holy Bull with Fierceness kind of flopping, that lack of going forward that we sometimes talk about. Now, in fairness, I do think he had a rougher start than a lot of people realize, because if you don't watch the head on, you don't see how bad it was. He got bounced around pretty good coming out of the gate. And that can be more significant than people realize.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I think the most telling angle that I saw was the camera shot on top of the starting gate, and you could see them break from the gate, and he got pinched pretty good.
Right.
So we know that can have certainly have an impact on the race. I think the counter argument to that though is, and tell me if I'm not making any logical sense here, but you've still got plenty of time to kind of regroup and recover. I don't know, like I just would have expected that a horse of this caliber, Breeders' Cup juvenile winner, would have been able to kind of rebound from that over the next mile that the race was run.
I'm glad you brought that up, and I'll tell you why. That was a common opinion of a lot of people on social media that basically said, hey, after that, he had a lot of time, after the first turn, into the first turn, Johnny got him in position. He was sitting in a beautiful spot. He just came up empty, to Hayes. And that sounds like a very logical argument on the surface, and it very well might be. But here's how I'm going to explain it to you. And this goes back to a discussion that I had with Mike Smith years ago after Shared Belief got hit in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
that's a classic example of this.
Okay. All right. Everybody said, well, he had all that time, to recover. Now, here is something that people may or may not understand. And I think it depends on how much individual athleticism you may have, or how you've been exposed to sports and playing anything with contact. Horses are 1,000 pounds, let's say 1,100, 900, whatever, about 1,000 pounds, 1,200, some of them. Now, let's say you and I are getting in a ring to box, okay, and we're going to go 12 rounds. All right. And before the first bell, okay, 10 seconds before the first bell, never mind 1 second or 2 seconds, 10 seconds before the first bell, you get a free shot and you bang, hit me right in my chest. Boom. You knock my wind out. Bing, bell rings. I don't care how much of a better fighter I may or may not be than you. I've got no chance to get that win back. Okay. Yeah. Now I'm in the fight. We're going at it, and there's no chance to recover. So we don't know from the outside looking in, and there's nothing you can tell watching a replay that will tell you this. You want to know who knows? Johnny knows. And now Todd knows. And now Mike knows, because Johnny will tell them. Because if when he had that contact, he got his wind knocked out, and Johnny could hear that and him gasping, you know what I mean? And Johnny hustling to get into it. The race is essentially over for him. And it would make sense that he came up empty. Now, again, that's something that we don't know. So in scenario A, where he just got bumped around and he didn't get his wind knocked out, I would say that it's a very valid argument that, hey, he got in position, he had plenty of time to settle down, and he just came up empty, okay? And that would be a huge negative. However, if he got his wind knocked out, which can happen when a 1,000-pound animal hits another 1,000-pound animal, and then from the other side, another 1,000-pound animal hits that same animal, which in reality and fairness is what happened to Fierceness. If that happened, then you just draw a line through that race, and we find out who he is in the Florida Derby or wherever he surfaces. Hopefully he came out of the race good and is still, I mean, we have an interview with Todd on the channel where, Frank Mornier was part of the group that spoke to him, Todd, after the race. He said, they plan to go forward with him. So it looks like he came out of the race and will still point to the Florida Derby. But the key to that whole discussion is whether or not he got the wind knocked out of him. Shared Belief did in that Breeders' Cup Classic, according to Mike. He heard it, he felt it, and the horse never had a chance to recover. And just, use the in the ring analogy, How do you recover from that? If you or I get a free shot and you knock the other guy's wind out, or you knock mine out, I knock yours, doesn't matter how much better a boxer than me you are. You know what I mean? If I can knock your wind out, and you're just not going to recover unless you have that 5 minutes to walk it off.
Yeah, that's true. I think part of it too, and it just feels like a lot of times people are very quick to make excuses for Todd's horses. I don't know. Like, I feel like we saw it a lot with this Forte horse last year, and everybody making excuses for him. And
Even when he was winning, he was winning, right? He won the 2 preps in Florida,
yeah, and then he got hurt,
right?
and he won the Jim Dandy at Saratoga. And then, all along, it's just excuse after excuse after excuse. And I don't know. I feel like that was the same with Fierceness. And, maybe there's a valid reason for that, like you just mentioned with
And I'm not saying that I know that there is or that there isn't. He could very easily be a flop and a horse that just didn't go forward off his 2-year-old year. And it's not the first time he flopped. He flopped into Champagne and on the wet track. So
Right.
he just may be a horse that if he doesn't like it, if it doesn't go his way, he throws in the towel. And when he gets the perfect trip, like he did in the Breeders' Cup, like he did when he broke his maiden at Saratoga, then he's some horses just they get things their own way. They run different than when they don't. That's that heart factor that you can't train or breed or get into an animal that doesn't have it.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens when he comes back. But I was it was a little bit of a lackluster effort, I think.
It was very disappointing. I mean, again, not knowing that he did get his wind out. Okay, and again, we don't know. But when they turned for home, you would think he would have been able to go by a sprinter who he had, in a sense, already collared. You know what I mean? It's not like Hayes coming out of those 2 sprints, just wired him up by 2-3 lengths the whole way, and he never got a chance to get through him over a Gulfstream that, is a speed-friendly track. I mean, he had every chance to go by him, and for a second, I thought he was going to go right by him. I thought, is anybody going to come from the back and be able to collar Fierceness? I thought that was the question, and then he turned him away.
Yeah.
So I think there's more questions than answers with Fierceness right now.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree.
And then we go back to 2 out of an awful lot. 2 Breeders' Cup juvenile winners have won the Kentucky Derby. Just 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something to that, right?
It's a powerful. I'm not a big stat guy. I follow them and I pay attention to them, and I'm aware of a lot of them. But I always think, like a football game on any given Sunday, those stats don't matter, because if you bet the Derby and you bet the 3rd one that wins, the fact that it was 2 for and now it's 3 for doesn't really matter. But yeah, it's a telling stat, if nothing else. So
yeah. Did you have any additional thoughts on the prep at Oaklawn or the one at Aqueduct?
It was no. I don't think there was a lot to get for the Kentucky Derby out of either one of those races. So maybe now horses humble everybody. So now the winner might come out of one of those races because I said that, but I really didn't see it that way. The Smarty Jones, I think you can maybe look at that. There could be a lot of horses that just didn't like that track. Maybe Aqueduct, same thing. But I didn't see anybody going into either of those races that really was on my radar. And I'll say this. I still go back to the Remsen as being the race of races for the Kentucky Derby to date, with Dornuch or Dornuc, however you pronounce it. Again, I apologize. I'm terrible with names. And Sierra Leone. That's an easy one for me. But and I still think that Sierra Leone is a turn the table horse on Dornuch as they go forward. So that nothing has changed my mind about that. And the more I watch that replay and the more I watch those two, the more anxious I am to see them hook up again and see if I'm right and see who's really gone forward and developed between those two. Because we haven't seen them yet, and I still rank both of them pretty high.
Yeah, I imagine we might, be treated to a rematch between those two and at Keeneland, perhaps in the Bluegrass.
It's very possible.
Yeah.
Certainly very possible.
All right, let's take a quick timeout, and we'll come back and we'll dive into the Sam Davis at Tampa.
Absolutely.
All right. Here we go. I got this handy.
One thing I will say is, Tampa Bay Downs is what I call a misunderstood racetrack. Okay, gets overlooked. It's a great racetrack for horses to leg up on. So I always and for years have been making scores on horses coming off Tampa Bay and going to, Aqueduct in the spring or Keeneland or wherever. Because a lot of times people think, they're second tier horses, third tier horses. It's, second or third tier track. It's a great track to leg up on. Horses get very fit off that track. So I tend to really like horses coming off Tampa Bay Downs. Okay. I'm going to put a link in this video to an interview we did with Antonio Gallardo, where we talked about what a quirky track that Tampa Bay Downs is. And he goes into why on the interview. So I think that's something that, especially going into this weekend and handicapping these races at Tampa, because he talks about the turf and the dirt that people might enjoy. So I'll put a link to that in the video. But I'm ready to talk Sam Davis.
Yeah, I don't have the stat in front of me, but it just seems like Todd Pletcher wins this race every single year with somebody that, then moves over to Gulfstream and kind of underperforms. But I don't know, what you have more of a historical Rolodex in your head.
He does do well at Tampa in these Derby races. Then Tampa Bay has just not been a great, Kentucky Derby producing racetrack, but it still doesn't take away from my theory that horses get legged up very well. But if you just don't have the right horse, to win the Derby, you don't have the right horse. But
Right.
It's funny you said that, because I do land on a Pletcher horse in this race. I don't know, the morning line's not out yet, and I don't know if it's the one that is going to be the shorter price of the two. I really can't tell, probably, but who knows? But why don't we talk about, everybody in the race?
Yeah.
Because I've got some, quirky opinions at this quirky track. So what'd you think of El Principito?
It seems like he had a little bit of a rough go last time out, a couple of weeks ago. So maybe an opportunity to improve off that, but I think there are better, faster, more reliable horses in here.
I tend to agree. El Principito. I apologize. I added an extra thing to his name. But I think he's most likely, out of those three sprints over Tampa and drawing the rail, part of the pace. So I think he will assure that there's some pace in this race and kind of help set it up. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot more likely winners and a lot more a lot better options as we go down the page.
Yeah. This tireless, question. I was looking at this last night, and just a question came to mind that I wanted to ask you. Do you put much stock into horses that take a certain number of tries to break their maiden? Like, is that concerning that it took this horse four attempts to get its first victory?
4, no, and I mean more than 4. When it's stuck in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times, yeah, I tend to shy away from those. But a lot of times when a horse takes 3 or 4 times, they're learning the game, they're improving. You don't know. Some horses take a couple of starts to get comfortable, and then you have horses come back off races like this, and they'll refer to it, some people, as the light bulb theory. And the light bulb went off, and now he learned how to win, and they come back and win again. So I'm not overly concerned with that.
They paid $875,000 for this one.
They sure did. He's certainly pricey. He's not the Pletcher that I like. Interestingly enough, I think he's going to get his fair share of support. But
that pedigree is
it's very good. And his last race over the track is definitely an edge with a win over the track. But he went on Lasix. Now he comes off Lasix. He was 1-2 that day, so I don't know what he was beating. He might have been beating horses that he was just supposed to beat and better than. Like you said, he couldn't win at Kentucky Downs. He couldn't win at Keeneland. He didn't win at Churchill. They did originally, keep him on the grass. But a lot of times people make the mistake and think that they're running these horses on grass because they're sure or think they're turf horses. But a lot of times it's because they just think they're distance horses, and the grass races are longer for the 2-year-olds, and there's more options to get in and more options to run. So, that could be something that comes into play as well. But, I mean, it's Pletcher into Sam Davis with one of the leading riders over there, St. Elias, Vinny Viola and company, Mike Rapoli. I mean, obviously he could win. He's not where I land, and I think he probably takes more money than he deserves in the betting.
Yeah. What about this Patriot Spirit? I liked. It seems like this horse is improving. The second and third starts, he got beat, pretty handily. But the pace figures improved, speed figures improved. So feels like, to me, at least looking at it on paper, that this horse is kind of rounding into form and could be a player in here, in my opinion.
I agree. I think he's, lack of a better term, one of the main speeds, maybe even the speed of the speed. I think it would not be impossible coming out of the inaugural, and being, a little bit fresh, and working, fairly well at Tampa, that he could stretch out and get the lead here. This trainer's pretty good with sprint to routes and 2 sprint to routes move. A little bit of an under the radar bond. I agree with you 100%. I think this horse, is dangerous, especially if he clears.
Yeah. I think, we second start at Churchill in the Iroquois, ran a mile. I mean, he's by constitution. So, I don't suspect that the distance should be much of an issue as he stretches out here.
Agree.
Crazy.
He's worked him a mile, so he's trying to put that bottom and stamina into him. So.
Right. What about this next one, Crazy Mason?
He looks like, like an outside fringe player to me. He looks what I would refer to as like a cut below some of the others in here.
Yeah. Agreed. I last race was fine. I mean, he won. But we'll
Again, like Pletcher's horse, he went on Lasix. Now he comes off Lasix. He was 3-5. The other one, Pletcher's horse was 1-2. So I think they were both beating, much lesser than they'll probably have to deal with here.
Yeah, exactly. All right, this No More Time, coming out of the Mucho Macho Man, which has gotten a little bit more sort of credibility over the last couple years as an initial sort of Derby prep. So I don't lightly race 3 races, but I don't know that we can just completely dismiss this horse. I think there's some positive signs from him. What do you think?
I agree. I think if you watch his last race, it's almost a toss for me because the whole way around he kind of looked uncomfortable. He was fighting Paco a little bit, not Paco. Paco rides him Saturday. He was fighting Jose Ortiz a little bit. He never really looked comfortable, never really fired. Took money that day in a race that was a stake race and a kind of early Derby trail race, and he went off 2-1. So there are people that liked him. He made a little bit of a wide, middle move, I thought, and I thought it was the kind of race he can go forward off, and I don't think he's a toss by any means. If he takes to Tampa and goes forward, he can certainly be a player.
What about that move from Gulfstream? Coming out of that race, I would assume normally you would think that they would stay at Gulfstream and kind of pick it up on the Gulfstream prep trail, but they're sending him over here.
Well, maybe Jose D'Angelo liked the extra week. For the Holy Bull. It gives him an extra week. He may have liked that. He may have felt he needed another work. He may have felt he needed another week. He was off from October to January, so he just, that could be the reason. The other reason could be, a lot of times you would think logically, and it doesn't have to play out this way, but logically you would think that you're going to face an easier field at Tampa in the Sam Davis than you will at Gulfstream in the Holy Bull. Right. He may have been ducking Fierceness. Maybe he thinks he's got a really live horse and has a big shot and was afraid of Fierceness and, bought into the hype and said, why run against Fierceness when I could wait a week and run there? So I really wouldn't read too much into that.
Right. Okay. This Agate Road, another Pletcher, been on the turf since the fall, and I thought that Breeders' Cup turf effort was fine. I'm assuming this is where you landed.
Yes,
getting back on the dirt.
Getting back on the dirt, has a lot of bottom, second off the layoff. Irad obviously is probably committed to Fierceness. Jose takes the call. Jose's got some live options, but yet he's going to Tampa to ride this horse. So they must think he's a potential Derby horse because everybody's looking for a Derby horse. So when you got one of the top guys that's willing to go to Tampa and ride him, that tells me that Irad said, yeah, he got a shot. Todd said, yeah, he's got a shot. And he's got a lot of bottom, and he's got, I think, off that Breeders' Cup race, a little bit of a potential class edge here to these. I mean, he's been in with some really, really good horses, albeit on the grass, but he handled the dirt at Saratoga fine. That funny mile distance that I hate, out of that Wilson chute. First time out, he had an awkward start, off slow and rallied. I don't think that's the best way to run. If you look how far back he was, I don't think that's the best way to run and win at that Wilson shoot. Yet
Yeah.
he still ran good. So I don't think the dirt's a problem. And I think if there's enough pace, which I can potentially see there being some pace in here, if that other horse we spoke about earlier, Patriot Spirit doesn't clear or isn't good enough to go all the way, I think Agate Road is the one that's running down the lane, running in the lane.
Yeah. Yeah, I could certainly see that. And, looking at the Brisnet past performances, just kind of based on the different running styles of this field, which, is pretty decent sized field. What do we got? 12 horses. There should be some decent pace up front that, I think you might get that, that ability to close. And, certainly Agate Road is probably shown more consistently than anybody else in this field, just the ability to do that late in a race.
Yeah, and he's never really run a bad race,
Yeah, right.
And he's never run on Lasix. He's not running on Lasix, so he's not one of those on-off Lasix type of horses. There's a few others in here like that, but I think that's good. We know that St. Elias and Rapoli and Todd are, not there for the weather, So I think he's dangerous, and like I said, I think he's the one running late. Whether I would like him a lot more if it was a mile and an eighth as opposed to a mile and a 16th, but
yeah,
you play the hand you're dealt.
Right. All right, this Copper Tax seemed like this horse was kind of on fire early in his career. Coming out of maiden claimers at Delaware, then kind of advancing through the ranks. But it seems like once the fall hit, he's kind of been fairly consistent and was moving forward a bit until a little bit of a dud effort in the Remsen. What do you make of this one?
Well, I think that like you said, he was on a little bit of a roll. I'm not in love with any of the horses that he was beating. He was running fast enough, but not really against this type. And I think that he didn't get out right in the Remsen. I think that his best style is to show some speed and show some pace. I think that fresh off the layoff, he will have some pace. I know they've been working him a mile. So obviously they're looking to put some bottom in him too. But I think he'll have some pace. I think he's a cut below the better ones, but I think he's one of the ones that I'm hoping helps set it up for Agate Road.
Yeah. Ever Do It. Another one coming out of the Mucho Macho Man. What'd you think about this one?
He briefly made the lead in the Mucho Macho Man and gave it up pretty easily.
Yeah.
I got a hard time getting to him here. I mean,
Yeah.
I respect the connections. I respect Kevin Rice. I respect all the Rices. They're always dangerous. Kevin, Adam, Linda, all of them, going back to Clyde Rice and every other Rice that I can remember. But he'd be a big surprise to me.
What do you make of these last two bullet workouts, though? Is that obviously, depending on the trainer, you might be able to get a little bit more info, depending on who's training the horse. But do you make anything of those two efforts?
Not particularly. Unfortunately, I did not watch those works, so I'm only going by what I see. I mean, they're fast works. They're good works. They tell me he's going to be sharp. But even assuming he's going to come in sharp, and getting back to a track that he obviously likes better than Gulfstream, I think he's, in a little bit over his head.
Yeah. Change of command. Decent connections here. Shug and Gaffleon on a 2-race win streak here. Blinkers on. Feel like there's a fair amount to like and get behind here. I prefer somebody else a little bit more, but just wanted to let's start there. I feel like there's a couple of things that you can get behind with change of command.
Well, they paid $1 million for him, and he's buying into mischief. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of expectations there, right?
Right.
He took 3 times to break his maiden, so he broke his maiden on the 4th time, like the other horse we spoke about, and he did what we spoke about earlier. He kind of had the light bulb go off and come back and win again. So he learned how to win. He liked it, and he came back and was very game and won. A race that he was probably supposed to win. I remember that race, and he had to work a little harder than I thought he was going to, but he got the job done, and it looked like the kind of race that would really help a young horse. And Shug kind of lets his horses lead him to spots as opposed to him leading them to spots. So if he's running here, he sees signs. But I've got some questions too. Number one, on Lasix, now back off Lasix, so that's a little bit of a question. And you win 2 in a row, you put blinkers on. Interesting.
Why is that?
I don't know. Why? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you won 2 in a row, why you adding blinkers? Are you looking to sharpen him up? He won 1 easy and he won 1 in a fight. So I just find that interesting. I find it interesting also that if I've got a horse that's 2 for 2, you talked a little bit about this earlier. You got a horse that's 2 for 2 at Gulfstream. I'm not going to Tampa.
Yeah.
I'm staying at Gulfstream. So I see things to like. I see a horse with a lot of potential that's, maybe getting good and getting better, but he's got some question marks for me. I find it interesting. Jose winds up on Todd's horse instead of this horse. But again, we can't read too much into that because this may have been a late decision for Shuck to go here. You know what I mean? After, Jose already may have been committed. We just don't know those things.
Right.
But a toss, no. But question marks for sure. But, this is the kind of horse that can come out of a race like this and wind up on the Derby Trail for sure. He's $1 million into mischief in Shug's barn. He's got every right to improve.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if the morning line is out for this race yet. Yeah, so 3-1 on change of command, and just to Agate Road 7-2, and the other Pletcher tireless 12-1.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, this horse change of command should certainly be part of that pace set up early on. Might be sitting a head off or half a length off.
Might be sitting in the garden spot, right? Might be sitting in the garden spot and might get the jump on horses like Agate Road.
Right. How does this track play? I know last week we were talking about just kind of having that short run up into the first turn at Gulfstream at certain distances. This is 1.16 miles, coming from that 9th spot. You think that's enough time to get over closer to the rail and not get swung out, 3, 4, 5 wide?
I think it is if things go right. Obviously, there's a little luck involved that, and Tampa can be a track that gets very biased. Sometimes the inside's very good, sometimes the inside's very bad. Sometimes the outside and crown of the track is very good. Sometimes that's very bad. Sometimes it's speed favoring. Sometimes it's closers, and sometimes it's honest. So it's very hard to know. One thing is that, and sometimes it plays very fast, even though it's a deep sandy heavy kind of track. Sometimes
Right.
you see some fast times there. So it's just a quirky track. It's hard to read.
Yeah.
It really is.
This West Saratoga, I feel like for whatever reason, this horse has gotten a little bit of buzz behind it. I don't know. It feels like this. I see this horse's name pop up on Twitter or in articles, and I'm kind of curious why.
Yeah, I don't know why. I think he's, I guess, because he won the Iroquois, maybe, but and then
Yeah,
here's another one. Took 4 starts to break his maiden, breaks his maiden, comes right back and wins the Iroquois. So, again, I don't think there's too much to read into, 3, 4 times to break their maiden. We've got 3 horses now that are in this race that come back to win off that. So I don't think that's anything to really read that much into. But he doesn't catch my eye. I think he's in deep waters here. He's run some good races, but he'd have to prove to me that he's this good. His last 2 races were definitely not what I would call impressive.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree. I don't know. He lost by 12 lengths in his last start to that Bookham Dano, who, another horse that's been getting a decent amount of buzz, though obviously probably a bit more deserved than this one. The next one, Fulminello.
Fulminio. This time I think I got it right. Finally, I got one right. It's an Italian name, so Fulminio. You know, his 2 dirt races are okay. The first one was at Delaware. Probably needed it. I respect this trainer. He does pretty good job. Last race, couldn't really beat Crazy Moon, who I don't like. So I don't know. Agate Road handled them on the grass. In the Breeders' Cup race. Agate Road ran better than him there too. So I mean, I don't like him.
Yeah, probably a toss for me too. Though, based on his last race on the dirt, another one that you could kind of expect to be up close. Though,
Yeah.
he was a length and a half off, and they were going, 26. So, I don't know. Might be up there, but it seems like the other horses are going to be plenty faster than him early on, which probably puts him at a pretty severe disadvantage, I think.
I've got to agree.
Elysian Meadows.
Interesting New York bred. 2 for 2, both sprinting. Both off the pace, or at least sitting, one off the pace and one, kind of sitting / stalking. He's drawn wide. Junior and Mott win a lot of races and can certainly pop up with a horse that you don't expect. I don't really like him, but at the same time, if he won, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, this is where I landed.
Okay.
Mostly, 15-1 on the morning line. And, a lot of times I like to go through the races before the morning line is out there, just so, and you're going to hate that I'm going to say this, but just so I'm not swayed by the morning line. And I like these 2 races. I thought they were quality. Junior Alvarado going to Tampa to ride, I think, is a positive sign. Paid $175,000 for this horse. It's going to be his first start at 3. I feel like there's a lot of upside, and there is not one dynamic standout in this race. So if we're going to get a sort of off the radar horse that's going to come in and steal one of these preps, this is the one I'm going to go for.
I can't argue with any of that, but I would ask you this: what kind of trip do you envision him getting that puts him in a position to win?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of why I was asking you a few minutes ago about being on the outside and trying to get into the mix around that first turn. So yeah, I think Junior's gonna have to make a decision depending on what does he want to do? Does he want to be up close going into that first turn, or is he going to be content taking back a little bit and getting over to the rail and being sort of mid-flight going into that first turn? And I think just kind of looking at this, I think if he does that and is maybe sitting 6th, 7th going into that first turn, and is in the 2 or 3 path going around there, I think he'll be in a fine position to be able to position himself tactically along the backstretch and to be able to make a move around the turn and be in the mix. Personally, that's what I would prefer to see, rather than trying to rush him up, get him over, and get into that first flight of horses around the first turn. But that's I guess the gamble I'll be playing on Saturday.
Well, Junior's been riding really good, and Mott's been firing on all cylinders. So Junior's very capable of working out a trip from out there. I just don't know what kind of trip he's going to fall into from out there. I mean, I think he's going to have to play the break a little bit and see kind of what happens. And I always worry about, when you look at this horse's first race, it jumps out that, wow, he can, really rally from off the pace. But I think it's harder than people think for a off the pace winning sprinter to stretch out than it is for a speed sprinter to stretch out the first time, because the speed will carry when they stretch out for the first time. But a lot of times when an off the pace horse does it and they hit that second turn, that kick that they had first time out is not as strong second time out, until they get that 2-turn race under the belt. So I'm always concerned a little bit with a horse stretching out, and people think the opposite. People think, oh well, he came from off the pace first out, he's going to love the additional distance, and that may be true, but I'm always a little leery of it the first time that they do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think his best shot to win is falling into that situation, like you said, taking back, dropping over, and making a run. But listen, Bill Mott can train him to do that. So, that negates a lot of my concern. If you like him, I think you'll get, close to the morning line, and I think that's a fair price. I won't knock him.
What do you make of the looks like mid-December, late December, they sent him down to Payson Park from Belmont? I know the first 2 races were at Aqueduct, which I don't know how, I don't recall how it was playing back in November and December, but Aqueduct's been super deep from what I've been told lately. And the Belmont training track has been pretty deep and tiring and just kind of generally slow for a while now. What do you know about Payson Park and how that training track plays? Because, you know, just looking at these numbers, like these workouts are not, you know, all that inspiring, I guess. But I'm just curious what the difference might be.
Yeah, no, Payson Park is a very deep, heavy track, very safe. Great. It's a great track, great place to train, great place to leg up. Don't have to worry about slow works there because, like I said, you know, when you see a horse work fast there, it's a heck of a work because it's a deep, heavy track. Always has been, and is a great place to leg up. His works are fine. Not worried about that at all. And I view the fact that they took him from Belmont to Payson in, you know, late December, whatever it was, as a big positive because he could have left his horse back in New York to run against New York breds or you know, go for those New York bred stakes, which are relatively lucrative. He thought this horse was good enough to bring to Florida to run against Open Company and winds up running him in a Derby prep race. So that tells me that they like what they see.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where I'm on. Elysian Meadows for me at, you know, hopefully right around 15-1.
I think you'll get that. I think, you know, from the morning line that you know we discussed, I think the only thing that really sounded a little bit off to me was I think Tireless will probably be less than 12-1. And I think that Agate Road will probably be less than 7-2, unfortunately for me. But that's just how it shakes out. So we'll see what happens. We move forward.
Yeah. And then we've got a handful of races the following weekend too. That, you know, obviously we'll get to, but
what comes up next weekend? What comes up after? Is that the Louisiana, the Risen Star or something?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. I think that's when we get to see Sierra Leone and how he grew up from 2 to 3. I don't know if Dornuch is going there. We may see that rematch sooner than we thought. I don't know where he's heading.
Yeah, I don't know either. But yeah, perhaps down there, that would be exciting. Any last thoughts on this one?
No, well, I think there's, you know, 3 or 4 horses in here that could, you know, legitimately wind up on the Kentucky Derby Trail, and I think that, you know, they don't necessarily have to win in order to do that. You know, I mean, you know, a horse like the horse you like can run, you know, a bang up second or third and run a big race, and you know, first time going 2 turns, all of a sudden now he's on the trail. Where if he does that again in one of the other preps, he's in the race. You know, Agate Road, I think if I'm right about him and he comes running late, he doesn't have to win. But if he makes a strong close, he can come back in one of the longer preps and, you know, be a contender. You know, maybe No More Time steps up. You know, maybe I'm a little wrong about the other Pletcher horse. He's Tireless and, you know, he steps up. So I think there are horses here to watch. Change of Command, surely, $1 million horse from Shug. You know, he runs a good one. He doesn't have to win to wind up on the Derby Trail. So I think, you know, it's the Sam Davis, it's at Tampa, but you know, think this is a second tier race without, you know, a couple that could wind up in the starting gate on the first Saturday in May for the Run for the Roses would be a mistake and sell it short.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I think like I've been talking about for the last couple of months, you know, a lot of these prep races, you know, up until now, and, you know, maybe next weekend, the weekend after, more, at least for me personally, more information gathering than, you know, trying to necessarily like pick the winner and get paid for the winner. You know, I think we're learning a lot. And then the final 2 preps is where, you know, you can, you know, try and make your strikes, I guess, and then hopefully roll it into the Derby.
I agree. and I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that I do is, and one of the reasons why I like doing the Derby Radar show is because, and then before we did the show, I used to do a column, Derby Radar every couple of weeks. And the reason I do it is because I like to follow them and watch them and take notes and make observations as we move along, because all of that leads to a potentially better first Saturday in May when they load 20 horses into that gate. And I like to do that with the Derby and with the Breeders' Cup. Like, the Breeders' Cup, winning you're in races, I'm watching, not only to bet and win necessarily, but like you said, watching these races and taking notes on horses going forward and possible horses to play or play against, down the line.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of times you'll see somebody get a really cushy trip and, or you'll see a horse get in trouble that, some other people might not see. And, you could wind up putting yourself in an edge or advantageous position.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we'll leave it there. Good luck if you're playing.
Good luck if you're playing. Good luck if you're not playing and you just watch. But you should be playing because it's a lot of fun and you can win. So, all righty. Ciao for now. The Sure Bet Coffee Play today, which is actually in race 8. I like number 1, Francisco Clemente, who I believe should have won last time out in California. Was on the inside, swung very wide, finished very well, was probably best that day, but I think we see an even better race from him today.
Down the center, Francesco Clemente. He's trying to shift in, but he's shifting gears, and here he comes now. Francesco Clemente, front and center, and going away to win the McKnight.
We're going to see a very special filly in Warm Heart, who is just nothing but talent. I don't believe, in my opinion, Shug's horse that a lot of people are high on has the seasoning to handle her at this particular point, although he may go on and be a really good horse. Today is today, and the future's the future.
Here's Warm Heart. She got through at the rail. What a ride, and Warm Heart has hit the front. The globe-trotting Warm Heart is clear. Outside, I'm very busy, charging hard late. Warm Heart wins the Pegasus World Cup turn.
If there was ever a race, in my opinion, that pace makes the race, this year it's the Pegasus World Cup. Senior Buscador is a horse that I think can definitely slip into the triples, superfectas, maybe even the exacta. And if something crazy happens and we get a pace meltdown, I think Junior Alvarado is an underrated, very strong finisher. And I think that horse can definitely surprise people and make some noise late.
They come past the 8th pole. On the inside, it's still National Treasure holding on. Down the center, Senor Buscador, he's running out of time. National Treasure would not be denied.
here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
Tracking trips with Pick 6 King John Stettin. It's one of the best tools in horse racing for any level of player. It's your second set of eyes, spotting troubled trips, betting angles, track trends, horses to watch and favorites to fade, 10 figs, ticket structure, and more. At Tracking Trips, you're a friend with benefits. Not a member? You must hate winning money. Join Tracking Trips now. Visit pastthewire.com and we'll see you in the winner's circle. Remember, nobody does it better.
Number 1 is Mo Donegal by Uncle Mo. And they're off in the Remsen. As they come on for the finish, and it's going to be tight here in the Remsen. Mo Donegal. Mo Donegal bearing down on the outside. It's Mo Donegal and early voting, and it is Mo Donegal to win the Wood Memorial. And it will be Mo Donegal to win the Test of the Champion, the Belmont Stakes.
Does it better.